Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is yet another epi of League Unlocked. My name is Eric Flynn. I'm solo on today's episode as we dive into the Millennium Falcon for little week 5, which I believe has already been over a month of global power rankings in Split 1, as we are fully past round 1 in every major region's playoff push. Even if you include the Knights Road play-in all-in that happened in the LPL, because we had no LPL teams playing this week. We're heading into the Lunar New Year, and this is a, regular break that we're accustomed to having. But there are obviously several squads on here from the LPL that are either adjusted because the teams around them performing or underperforming in some cases, but of course they're still going to be heavily represented on this list, and we're now starting to get to the point where you get harder to do these rankings because teams start to get eliminated. You'll probably really start seeing that week 6 or the next time we do some of these, but for now pretty much all the squads are still on here, and we've slowly had to wean out squads, as we did last week, like Hanwha Life, who just aren't going to be playing any games for a long time. So there's really no point in actually having them on a list like this. But when we go 22-11, 19 and 20 are the same as last week, and neither of them really played a game. DNS already qualified their spot for playoffs, and they're chilling in that losers bracket. Same could be said for NIP, except they will have the luxury of obviously having a loser's bracket playing against BLG, and that going to be a tough matchup for sure. The first real actual change on this list is, yes, LNG goes the way of Hanwha Life. I built up all this hype. I still think they'll be back in Split 2 and make an impact and have some upsets in the LPL for Split 2, but they're off the list for now, replaced by Team Secret Whales, TSW, who are well and on their way to playoffs. They're going to be playing Dplus Gaming, the second best team in the LCP right now, later on. But Team Secret Whales, a squad we should be familiar with. It's 4/5 of the roster that we saw at the World Championship last year. They took a game off of Koi, had some upsets. It's just Bai coming in over Taki as the starting support, and then Warhorses in as a new head coach. And obviously Bai is a guy who's been on GAM a couple of times. We're very familiar with him in that Vietnamese scene. But with the Flying Oysters, number 1, they're already eliminated, but we know that whole roster got blown up. It's looking like now between Team Secret Whales and Dplus going to be the representatives for the first stand from the LCP. But we'll see how the rest of the playoff push plays out there. But for now, TSW hanging pretty in that number 18 spot. Another squad making their debut on this list, and truthfully a squad I didn't think we'd ever be talking about cracking the top 20. That is Team Sentinels, fully shedding the washed allegations, even if they proceed to get completely slapped by Cloud9, maybe even lose in the losers bracket. I feel like they're already in the green and have gone further than most teams would have anticipated after that Game 5 win against DSG. And you might go, well, they needed 5 games to beat Disguised. How are they going to be on here? Well, Disguised are actually pretty good, and you add that to the resume of Sentinels already beating Team Liquid earlier in the split, and you're going, okay, Huhi and Impact coming back here. Darkwing's part of this incredible new wave of young domestic talent in the LCS. Guys like Sajed and Kryra already young, again, ERL tier 2 guys that have gotten the promotion, and oh my gosh, look, they can actually perform on this big stage. The guys on FlyQuest, who sadly, after getting completely drubbed by Cloud9, are off of this list. But again, guys like Griffin Cryogen, obviously Masu's, now a veteran at this point, but we're seeing this talent pipeline from the tier 2 NACL actually get results in this main tier 1 stage of the LCS. So keep it coming, guys. We've been harping and asking for this for years, and it's slowly trickling in, and we're seeing the results with a squad like Team Sentinels. Golden Glue at the helm for them, number 17 on this list. Ahead of them is this trio collision of LEC squads, and you obviously have Vitality was ahead of them last week. You get the head-to-head MKOI versus VIT, and obviously Mark and I spent a good amount of time talking about the chrono break that happened, and yes, you can give credit to MCoy for turning the game around after that and proceeding to have a much more convincing game 2, but there's still a pretty big asterisk between that matchup, and I think you saw that these teams, I mean, based purely on that 53-minute plus game 1, they were very evenly matched, and the rankings should reflect that, and obviously they do in that 15-16 spot. Harder for them to climb a little bit higher than that, and they also get jumped over by G2 Esports, who climbed up 3 spots to make their way back to their rightful territory that is the top 10 on a list like this, where we are just so accustomed to having them hang out. They're not quite there yet. We need to see, obviously, a series that isn't against somebody like Team Heretics, but they absolutely took care of business and completely destroyed them, even though they were the lower seed. LOL funny memes on that one. But G2, I mean, they looked fully operational. Broken Blade was truthfully a bit of a passenger princess in that one. Didn't have to do much on that top side. Claps was fully out to showcase, and Skewmond. Listen, even though G2's record was never, I mean, good by their standards, they were only 1 game above 500 in that round robin stage, but Skewmon still had some absolutely nutty numbers in the jungle, and I know with the slow start, people were immediately saying, how did you not change this jungle support heading into this year with Skewmon and the Brav? And, well, I think as we see these playoffs are going to continue to play out, you're going to see why they didn't need to. These are still top tier in their position, at least like top 3 for a squad like G2 within the LEC. So overreactions are something we are very accustomed to, especially with a squad like G2, especially the overreactions of them underperforming, not being good, washed. It's no longer the G2 era. They showed a graphic in the last matchup for them about their placements in playoffs over the last, it looked like it was at least 6, 7, 8 years, and I believe they had a single 4th place finish in playoffs in 2023. Other than that, it was mostly first or a few seconds. So yes, it doesn't really matter what the regular season is. Playoff G2 is the Grim Reaper that comes for all teams in the LEC, and we absolutely saw that in this opening weekend. 3 LPL teams to close out this board. Obviously, none of them played. World Elite and Top Esports are locked in, still in the same spot as last week after they went head-to-head in Game 5. It's just Weibo that was in the top 10 that's been pulled back a little bit, yanked into that 11 spot, but still feel like it's a very similar power level between all 3 of those LPL squads. Just let the playoffs begin over in China. Top 10 action, and the reason Weibo got bumped out of that 10 spot is because a squad like Na'Vi, who actually closes the gap even a little bit more to Carmine Corp. It's not G2 hanging out in that top 10, but Na'Vi have been unbelievably clean, going back to the regular season, and they carried that. They embarrassed Fnatic. This series was not close. Poby gets his revenge, as again, Mark and I kind of talked about, and Rylash is like, this is one of the best rookie starts that we've had since, well, probably Kalist or Skewmon or Yike. But what is up with EU junglers coming in and having a massive impact? We've seen him get fired up in some of these mic checks. I'm just assuming he's probably, typing some action. But he has been an absolute blessing. And we know this guy was hyped up last split. He just wasn't ready or wasn't able to start for them. But now that we've seen him, be the de facto starting jungler for this squad, he has been an absolute treat to watch, and the rest of this Na'Vi squad has as well. Han Samdi has proved, Samdi. We removed the Hans. Just Samdi has been absolutely deadly, and AD carry remains probably, in my opinion, the most stacked position in Europe right now. Case in point, a guy like Samdi and a guy like Kalist right ahead of him on Carmine Corp. As Na'Vi climbs into that top 10, we take one tiny step back, like we shoved Carmine Corp. They're still balancing, of all the 2-0s that happened, Na'Vi destroys Fnatic, G2 dismantles Team Heretics, they get the bump. It wasn't as big a stomp against Giant X for KC, especially that second game where they needed a, I'm not going to say miracle, but desperation, maybe that's even a little too hard. They needed a clean little Baron steal out of Yike to kind of get that second game, and it's still... I know people are harping, oh my god, the Los Bretones fans are out in full force saying they were win trading to make sure LR didn't make it, yada, yada, yada. That a little ridiculous in my eyes that they would be caring about whether or not Los Bretones get through. But a little slow end to the regular season with that loss that they did get. And now, again, they 2-0 Giant X, so there's not anything to actually take into account or be worried about for this squad. But really, I'm just defending the point that Cloud9 has jumped over them as that top Western squad in that 8th spot, and that's again combined with their performance against Giant X and Cloud9. 10 games in now, getting at least a decent sample size of this squad and a single lone loss. 9-1 overall. Obviously, that's completely undefeated in best ofs and leveled up from their last matchup against FlyQuest to bounce back and completely destroy them in 3-0 fashion. You saw a solid pick ban draft plan throughout the entirety of this series, and this team is... There's new life in them for a squad that only made one change, where most of the other LCS teams made sweeping changes across the board. APA comes in, as we already kind of alluded to. Galio, I think we could add that to the champion pond that is APA. But the major statistical categories that Cloud9 are leading, not just within the LCS, but we're talking globally, at least in terms of the major regions. They still have the highest team KDA, over 2. Only them and Gen.G have over a 2.0 team KDA, which is absolutely ludicrous. They're second in goal differential behind LNG. Pour one out for them. 95% of Barons taken is good enough for first among all major regions, and then second only behind Gen.G in terms of turret plates per game, just shy of 40. So they have been absolutely dominant and haven't really had an easy matchup yet. They've only been playing against Lion Gaming, Team Liquid, kind of the top of the table squads, and FlyQuest we thought were maybe overperforming. We'll see how they do in losers bracket now, but very excited for this Sentinels matchup. And even though Sentinels are again on this list, like, I'm fully expecting Cloud9 to kind of dumpster them with the level that they're at. We've got MVP Vlaber, OG Niels is looking like he's back on the Rift. We haven't seen Vulcan playing to this level in the massive support gap that we had against Cryogen, who's a rookie, and we're going to give him a pass. But Vulcan has not been in this form for a long time, and Thanatos is still, the premier laning top laner in the entire league. So 2 thumbs up, green flags only for Cloud9 right now. JDG bumped, not bumped down, hanging out in that 7th spot still. Again, LPL squad didn't play any games. Dplus get knocked out of that top 5. And listen, I think... we predicted the big upset against Gen.G. We missed that prediction just by one matchup. It was BNK against T1, blah, blah, blah. But Dplus, they had avenues. They had moments. Maybe there was a bit of plot armor for Gen.G, or you would just say they are the better, cleaner, more confident team, which, check. Yes, 21 losses in a row have Dplus suffered at the hands of Gen.G, but, a close game 4, and they did at least get the check mark of handing Gen.G their first loss, just single game loss of 2026 so far, so that's the tiny, sad feather in the cap that Dplus can put, and they're still a very difficult squad to grade, as is tradition for Dplus, because they're basically a sine wave, right? The complete up and down when they don't have any, they will have a lower tier matchup against either DNS or DRX, and it's either going to be a 5-game banger that they barely scrape through, or they completely 3-0 stomp whoever the winner of that matchup is, as they lead into what... Again, they're going to be huge favorites against either of them. We're going to assume that Dplus will then match up against T1 in that next round of the bracket, and those almost always deliver on the Rift, except for the odd time when Dplus gets stomped. But it's not quite a 21 series losing streak against T1, but it's still not great for them, as of course the big test is still the two-headed dragon beast that is at the top of the table in the LCK. But still feeling okay about Dplus with the level up from BNK. I'm not feeling good about them going to first stand, but in terms of, still being a top 4, maybe top 5 Worlds, by the way, the 4th seed for the LCK this year is going to be absolute lunacy to be able to qualify for it, because there are so many good teams in the LCK for yet another split. Many of those good LCK teams are represented in the top 5. That's right, 3 out of 5 now coming your way from the LCK, and we absolutely have movement on this board, first and foremost courtesy of BNK FearX, the Fox's mega impressive, mega surprising upset win over T1. We start, BLG gets knocked down a spot to the number 5 zone. Again, 6-4, 15-10 overall. They didn't play this week. I'm going to need some stomps coming their way, especially getting the easiest draw of NIP in that first round. Going to need a swift 3-0 or convincing 3-1 out of BLG to start to feel good about them. But BNK obviously ascends into that top 5, and where this is a conservative, tentative placing that we've done. They go up 2 spots into the 4 spot, winning a single best of 5, where I think the absolute consensus will and should be T1 was far and away from their best on the day. Worst series that we've seen out of FaZe this year. Far and away worst series out of FaZe. A lackluster series out of Kyria. Faker, it kind of felt like old T1 where Faker had to try and do a little bit too much and ended up getting punished for it. So T1 by no means being their best on the day, despite how good BNK were. It's not enough for us to put them over T1 when you're looking at the body of work from the entire split so far. T1 literally doubled their losses in a single series, right? They had only lost 3 games, all split to that point. So what it does is it shrinks that gap, right? And we kind of said, even if Gen.G or T1 lose a series, are they going to get bumped out of that top 2? Well, yes, they are, and now they're right up beside BNK, and I mean, they're not going to... If BNK has a competitive series against Gen.G, take a game, a competitive 4-game, or force a 5th and decisive Silver Scrapes matchup, well, then we can talk about BNK usurping that spot from T1. But for now, they are neck and neck, not enough to overtake them, but they are absolutely the real deal. They are a legit threat, not just for, a potential world's birth down the line, but obviously to T1 and Gen.G right now in this very moment. They are a threat, and because of that climb from them and the drop down from T1, it's kind of anyone's legend get the blessing of going, okay, yeah, we'll pop up to that number 2 spot. And again, it's a theme of the LPL here. We got to say, okay, we're just waiting for these squads to actually get on the rift. And I mentioned BLG kind of has that easiest matchup against NIP, AL drawing World Elite. And I know, they're the 2 top seeds, so they will and should have the lower seeds coming from that Perseverance group. But World Elite, I think, is a lot better than NIP. And obviously, as we do these lists, World Elite's comparable to, well, better than IG, comparable to top esports, and comparable to even Weibo. So I'm not going to say a tough draw, because AL are going to be Omega favorites against World Elite and will likely not be breaking a sweat, but just need to see them get back on the rift. And then as T1 falters, it's Gen.G alone standing strong at the top of that table. And yes, they did drop a game, so blow it up. The season's over. The perfect run is done. They're still undefeated in terms of best of series, and they... Again, despite having competitive series against Dplus, where Dplus found angles, they won a game, they probably maybe almost had a chance to win another game, Gen.G still very much felt in control for the majority of their wins at the very least, and we had some... One of the reasons I was going to say Dplus has the potential for an upset here is Showmaker is playing so well. He's been at the closest level to Chovy. Then maybe going back to, like, the dominant years of Dplus 2021, 2022. And then he proceeds to get completely gapped in that mid lane matchup. So that prediction did not come true, and I'm going to say that's one of the main reasons why that Dplus Gen.G upset did not happen. But yeah, Chovy had himself a hell of a series. Keen is continuing to be Mr. Consistent, and I think one of the things overlooked or not talked about really is the only actual change Gen.G obviously made coming into this year was Ryu coming in as that head coach, and I mean, drafting hasn't really been an issue for Gen.G. There really hasn't been any issue to talk about with them so far. So I'm just very curious now about this BNK matchup, because you very much saw in the T1 series that it's AD carry, it's hyper carry, build an entire comp. Even if it's Ashe Seraphine, our entire playstyle is around propping up this Ashe. Diablo is him. He is the dude on BNK that is going to have an entire comp built around him. So we'll see if this form of ruler is up to the task, because at least the first few weeks of the regular season, we were talking about that resurgent vintage performance out of ruler. So super excited to see that bot lane matchup, and a seemingly rejuvenated Vikla after that T1 series. I can't believe this is the dude who was in the LCS struggling and thought like a poor LCS performance meant the end of someone's career. That often can mean that, especially for guys going back to Korea, but he has absolutely built himself back up the hard way. Deserved starting spot here, but now he's going up against Chovy, so we'll see how he manages in that one. And of course, anytime you're doing a head-to-head matchup in a best-of series and you look at Gen.G, it's pretty hard to give an advantage either way, but it does feel like Diablo's doing something magical in that bot lane right now, and I know he, rightfully so, gets most of the attention and credit, but his synergy with Kellen right now is absolute S tier, cream of the crop, premier amongst a sea of premier bot lane duos in the LCK. So absolutely cannot wait for the weekend matchup between BNK and Gen.G, with the potential to climb in that top two for a squad like the Foxes. But that is it today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. Thank you to all you stunning individuals for hanging out, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.